Welcome back to another episode of Trojan Dash. I'm your host, Reagan Griffin Jr., and I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend himself, Nathan Ackerman. How are we doing today? How are we doing?
Dude, I'm so excited to get going. I heard there's been a lot of smack talk about USC football in previous Dashboards TV shows. I'm not having that, and I'm excited to sort of drop the hammer today.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. But in other news, this week was probably one of the most monumental weeks we've seen in sports in a very long time. We witnessed the Milwaukee Bucks after the unfortunate tragedy that was the shooting by a police officer of Jacob Blake 7 times in the back. They said enough is enough. We're not playing today. We're going on strike. And the rest of the sports world followed suit. We saw the rest of the NBA teams. We saw MLB teams. We saw Naomi Osaka. We saw soccer teams. The whole sports world, for a brief moment, said we're done with this. What were your thoughts on it, Nathan?
I hope people really take the time to appreciate the gravity of this moment in sports, because I feel like a lot of people were saying, there were obviously some people on the internet that for some reason are against all this, and they're saying athletes shouldn't be standing up for these kinds of things, which I don't even want to talk about because I don't think that's worth addressing right now. But I think this is going to be a day that we look back on in 5 years and say, this was a turning point. And this was a time when athletes not only used their voice, but they said, look, if you're not going to respect us off the court and you're not going to respect our livelihoods and appreciate us for being people, not just being athletes, we're not going to play, and you don't deserve to watch us play. And I think they're absolutely right in doing that. And I think this is something that down the road, we're going to say, wow, Wednesday, August 26, 2020, that was huge.
I definitely view it in the same light that you do, as a turning point, because, like I said, it was for a brief moment, but for the first time that I think ever, at least in my time observing sports, did we see athletes truly flex the power that they have over their sports, right? Because it's one thing to say we're going to try to play and we're going to try to coincide that with social justice, but it's another thing to point the finger back at the ownership and back at the leadership within the community and say, if you guys are not going to honor us and what we're trying to do, then we're not going to play anymore. And the question that I have for you, could we see this disseminate into the collegiate level? Because if you ask me, I don't think this is going to be the last time we see this. So do you think there's potential that at the collegiate level, specifically USC, could this happen at some point in the future?
So I think this is a pretty complex question. And I think college athletes are definitely going to want to be able to take that stand. And I think that they're going to be more than willing to do so. But where this all starts, and this only really flies when athletes are given that platform in the first place. And I think that professional sports leagues, especially the NBA, the MLB, is just so tone deaf and doesn't know at all what they're doing in any of these things. But I really question whether or not the NCAA is going to let this happen and not hand down some sort of punishment, which I think is sad, because college athletes we've seen have a voice. And in the last couple of months, the last couple of weeks, we've seen them use that time and time again. But especially in an environment where they're not being paid, where scholarships could be taken away. I mean, the NCAA said, I think last week or so, that students who opt out of a spring year won't have their scholarships taken away, but only if they opt out for COVID-related reasons. And that was what they specified, which means I think that they were intentionally leaving the door open to say, look, if if we think that you're overstepping, which it shouldn't be taken that way, but the NCAA is really obsessed with their power. They really don't want college athletes to speak at all. If they feel like that's what's being done, I don't know if they're going to create that environment where that sort of thing can fly. And I think that's sad, but I think that that's the unfortunate reality. And I wouldn't be shocked if that kind of thing were to happen, because at the end of the day, all these athletes understand that this is about more than sports. But I hope that the NCAA sort of facilitates that and allows that to be something that could definitely happen, because I think college sports needs that.
So it's kind of, I see two things at work here, right? And I actually just got off the phone with Lisa Leslie, a women's basketball legend for USC. And she was telling me about how athletes should be using the platforms that they get from their sport to speak out on certain things. And I agree with that 100%, right? So if you are in a situation where, say, you're Keegan Slovis, right? And I'm the quarterback at USC, I have a voice on these things. By all means, if you feel so inclined, speak up. But when you're talking about pointing the fingers at the powers that be and trying to ask some of them to change what they're doing and no longer be complicit in these things, right? If I'm an NBA player and I'm saying, you know what, Mr. Team Owner, you have a lot more power in this than I do. You guys have money. You guys have influence. You guys know the people who can actually change these things. I'm looking at you. I'm not pointing the finger at society. I'm looking at you right now. You're not supporting me, so I'm going to combat this by sitting up. So that's the kind of the dichotomy there, right? Is if you're pointing the finger at the people that you're associating with within your organization, that's when I see it fit to strike. When you're trying to uplift other voices and use your platform to vocalize your concerns, that's when I see it fit to go and play. But I do agree with you that the NCAA is going to do everything in its power, right? We know what the NCAA does. They don't want to see athletes get paid. They don't want to see athletes profit from their likeness and image. They don't want to see their athletes be anything but mules to profit from, right? The NCAA is going to do everything in its power to make sure that the athletes don't do this. But they know that they need those athletes or else there's no product whatsoever. They know they need a Keaton Slovis. They know they need all these athletes to be on the field, on the court, on the track, or else there is no product. So the important thing would be, or the question to ask, is whether or not the players are going to recognize and say, hey, you know what? We still have the power. And we saw this, right? Hashtag we want to play. Like the movements, the We Are United movement. We saw players, right, say, we know the power we have over you, and we're going to flex that power. And what the NCAA do? Well, we're not going to have a season anymore. It's going to be. I think we're in a dramatic shift right now. We're in the midst of the dramatic shift of the ideology that the NCAA, the NBA owners, whatever sports league you're talking about, they are understanding. Everyone's coming to the understanding that they do not hold as much power as we all previously thought. It is the athletes that have the power in this situation, and they're going to be willing to flex it in the future. So to answer the question, I do think we could see a strike at the collegiate level sometime in the near future. I think we darn near saw one this year, and should things continue the way that they are, I wouldn't put it outside of the realm of possibility at all.
Yeah, my only problem is I definitely hope you're right. I definitely think you could be right. I think there's a too large proportion of the sports world, sports fans population that sort of sees sports as this sort of escape and this sort of thing that exists in a bubble and in a vacuum, so to speak. And leagues like the NFL, the NFL was late to the party, but I think they're starting to get there. But especially the NBA, they don't really see that as the case. And they see this as a place where sports play an integral role in our society and they speak to bigger issues. And I think the NCAA is a step behind in that. I still think that they're holding on to this whole, we want to keep politics, politics meaning basic human rights. So it's not political at all, but they like to frame it that way. We want to keep that out of our sport. We want to keep that out of our thing. So I think I hope I'm wrong, but I just really see the NCAA resisting. I don't think the players are gonna take that because I think that they understand that there are bigger things at play here. So I think that they will formulate some sort of boycott or strike. I just don't know if it's gonna fly as easily as it did with the NBA. Basically saying we're going to take a few days off and then reschedule. I hope this is a turning point in terms of college sports too. But with the NCAA these days and with athletes' rights and with social issues, with basic human rights that the NCAA needs to be more outspoken on, I'm going to have to believe it when I see it. So until then, I think it will happen. I don't know if the NCAA is going to be too pleased about it.
You know what getting punked is, Nathan?
What's that?
Getting punked. Are you familiar with that term?
A little bit, yeah. What's up?
So I think it's very easy to punk the NCAA. I think it's easier than we think to punk the NCAA because we saw it when we were talking about the name, image, and likeness, right? There was a situation where California, they decided, their board of governors said, you know what, these athletes should be able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. And what did the NCAA do? Well, if you do that, then maybe you don't compete in the championships anymore. And California said, okay, we're still passing the law. And what does the NCAA go ahead and do? Well, now everyone can do it, right? They got punked, man. The NCAA is not this powerful entity that we think it is. And I think it's very easy to get them, or not very easy, but easier than we think to get them to back down, man. But I want to keep it pushing, man. Let's go ahead and talk about this uptick in USC COVID cases. You're in LA right now. I'm in LA right now. News broke that there was a couple of cases in the NCAA or in USC and some of those cases coming from the football and men's water polo teams. So they ended up cutting practice for the rest of the week. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I don't know if this is going to present a direct threat to the possibility of having a spring season. I think, obviously they're going to have to take a couple of days off from practice because, there's cases of the virus on the team. I don't know if this is directly going to pose a threat. As I said, I think that the way that we've seen students behaving in this whole return to campus thing, because, most schools around the nation are doing online classes, but I put the quotes around online because everybody's coming back. Everybody's, being students, being stupid, partying, doing all those things. And I think what we've seen now means that the same thing is going to happen in the spring. And unless the pandemic is totally done, the few instances, the few cases that are brought back to schools, they're just going to spread like wildfire. And this thing that we're seeing right now is just going to happen again in 3 months. So again, I don't think that the outbreaks right now taking place are obviously going to threaten the spring season because that's still months away. But I think we are learning a lot about the way students are acting and the sort of false sense of security, false, idea that it's not really going to affect them, that they don't have it, that they can do whatever they want. And I think that's going to pose a real threat to a spring season.
And news broke recently that the Big Ten, right, they decided we're going to go ahead and try it for Thanksgiving and have their first game. You're shaking your head right now. Clearly, you don't think that's going to happen. Tell me about it.
It's just not feasible. I mean, come on, you're going to start the season around Thanksgiving. You're going to have them, playing over winter break. You're going to have, who else? Who are they going to be playing against? Is it going to be the Big Ten by themselves, the Big Ten, the ACC, the SEC? Like, they're the only 3 conferences playing. I don't understand why there are conferences still trying to get this thing done on their own. Why not just have a full season, or not a full schedule, but everybody playing at the same time in the spring? Well, whether that's in the spring or next fall, I just don't think it's realistic to have 1, 2, or 3 conferences sort of operating with a few months delay and sort of going into winter break, going into Christmas, going into the time when these student athletes would typically, unless they're in a New Year's Six or a late bowl game, would be at home. They wouldn't be at campus. They wouldn't be expected to be devoting their whole entire offseason, their whole entire lives to this sport. And I just don't think it's a thing that players are going to be excited about. And I don't know if it's a thing that's realistic or if it's even worth it to have just several conferences and everybody else just do their thing in the spring. And then we have 2 different seasons with, 3 conferences playing now and 2 conferences playing now. And then nobody takes any of the awards and the accolades seriously. And it doesn't mean anything. So I don't know why they're even trying this.
I mean, I've been saying this from the jump, man. I don't understand why we as a society, right, we as an American people keep on trying to make plans for things that we know we're not prepared for yet, right? Why am I, I love arguing in analogies. Why would I prepare to have, spaghetti for dinner when I haven't even gone to the store and bought meatballs yet? Like, that makes no sense, dude. Like, can we fix this first? Can we fix the issue at hand before we start saying we're going to do X, Y, and Z? Because, I'm going to tell you what, right now, we're going to get to Thanksgiving and we're going to be in the exact same situation that we are right now. And then it's going to be, well, we're going to postpone it again. We're going to postpone it again. And to answer the question, I don't think COVID puts the spring season at risk as much as, just having 2 seasons in 1 year. I don't know why we're still talking about a spring season in general. I mean, I've talked to, some of my friends that play collegiate sports, and one of them, Trayvon, he plays for Cal Berkeley. He's on his last year of eligibility, but I asked him, I said, Trey, if you're in the hypothetical world where you had another year of eligibility, how would you feel about playing 2 seasons in the same year? And he said, well, I'm in a position right now, I don't have any aches and bruises and minor injuries that aren't going to impact me, but I know a lot of dudes that do. And you need that offseason to recover and make sure that you're recuperated for the following season. It makes no sense to me to say, let's take this spring season to immediately turn around and have a fall season, especially when you have the draft at hand. We talked about this last week. The people are trying to – here's what it is. You have a square, you have a cube, and you have the circular wooden thing. The kids play with these things when they're 2 years old, and they're trying to fit that square cube into the circular hole when it's just like, dude, come on. It's not realistic. Let's talk about the future. Let's make things happen down the road. We're trying to make things way too much happen in the present when it's just not feasible at all, man.
Yes and no. A lot of the sentiment that I've heard surrounding the prospect of playing a spring season, I think it was Talanoa Hufanga who said it in a press conference a couple of weeks ago. Somebody asked him, hey, could your body take playing 2 seasons in 1 year? And he said, it would be tough, but yeah. And here's why. Because playing a spring season is like spring ball. We're playing with contact. We're playing practicing, playing games pretty much every single day. It's basically the same level of physicality that you would get with regular spring ball. And I think the key to that is that we don't need to have a full 12-game schedule in the spring. I don't see why USC, any school in the Pac-12, needs to play more than 5-6 games, play everybody in the South, play everybody in the North if you're from the North, and then go to the conference championships, cut out the meaningless bowl games. We can make this happen without sort of telling ourselves that it has to be exactly what a fall season would look like. I think there's a way to do this in a much more scaled back format. I don't see why they need to play a full 12 games. I don't know why we need to have the Advocare, Little Caesars, Kraft, Fight Hunger Pizza, Gas Alamo Bowl, whatever they call it. We don't need to have those little things. We need the Rose Bowl. Well, we need the Rose Bowl. We need the college football playoff games. We need the New Year's Six bowls. Other than that, we don't need a whole lot. We just want some kind of football. And I think that if they tried a more scaled back thing, I think they could take it. Sure, football is a physical sport. These are guys that are in the best shapes of their lives. They can make it through one season just fine. I think that they get through a spring season just fine. And I think if we only play a few number of games, it doesn't need to be the full thing. Like I said, I think there's a way to make this happen.
I'll just tell you this because, obviously I never played football at the level that these guys do. But even in high school, man, there are certain things that just happen every so often where, just an Achilles injury or a foot injury, something that you can play through, but something that hurts like hell and you have to get treatment for it every day. Those are the sorts of things that I'm talking about when I say you need that offseason of recovery, because you're going to be asking those dudes to play through those sorts of things, right? Even during a spring season, when you talk about spring ball, you don't necessarily have to force yourself through it, right? If you tell a coach, hey, man, my foot's not feeling that great, can I take a week off to get this thing recovered? You can do that during spring football. You can't do that during the fall season, and that's what we're looking at in terms of saying let's have a spring and a fall season. You don't get that time to recover, and the worst injuries happen on top of other injuries. Those are the things because you're compensating for some sort of muscle imbalance, because you're compensating because you're stronger on one side of your body than the other. That's when the real tragic injuries happen, man. That's my biggest concern. But like I said, I'm sure a lot of the players would be down to do that, just considering that that's what they're here for, right? Is to play football. I'm just looking at it from perspective of making sure that I want to make sure these dudes are safe. Go ahead.
I want to add one more thing. I want to go back to the whole Big Ten Thanksgiving start football season thing.
Yeah.
The whole point of delaying the season was because the coronavirus is still way too prevalent. There are still way too many cases in all these campus places.
That's the key. No, it wasn't.
Okay, sure. They didn't try, but what they say, they didn't actually put together a real plan. They didn't care about student athlete input. They didn't actually try to get this done. But what they say is that given the health and safety concerns, it just wasn't feasible. So now we're going to delay the season by 3 months, and we're going to begin the season right at the start of flu season, which supposedly is going to exacerbate all the problems, make them way worse. The flu is going to be bad. Coronavirus is going to be worse. Communities are going to get they're going to be way worse off than they are now, and they're going to try to start it then. I just don't understand how that thinking possibly makes any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And let me tell you, because they did not delay this season because of coronavirus concerns. They were full and ready to have a season with the coronavirus up until the players started saying, make sure you give us our just due. That's why we're not having a season with us, because the players demanded what's rightfully theirs.
Right.
I think in their mind, they're hoping that all of this blows over and that they're able to have a season at that point.
Yeah, but the front that they put up was that it's health and safety concerns, meaning that once they do start the season, those health and safety concerns have to get a whole lot less severe, or else nobody's going to buy into it in the first place. So they're only going to do that when this thing is feasible, or when they believe that it's feasible. And again, if we're talking about the NCAA's shortcomings, I don't know if I trust them to know when it's feasible, given how much money is at stake. But yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
It lets you know that the things that they were talking about were a little bit of BS. Speaking of BS, let's move into our final topic. Let's get into it. Earlier this week, one of our fellow Dash hosts over at ASU had a take, an opinion, a thought of sorts. He said, USC is no longer wide receiver U. No longer is USC the king when it comes to the best wideouts in NCAA. ASU of all schools Not even Alabama. Not even when we're talking Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, Julio Jones. Not Alabama. Not Ohio State. No, even in the Pac-12, not Oregon. None of these other schools. ASU is now wide receiver U. Talk to me, Nathan. How you feeling?
Okay, we can get into how preposterous this take was. I think one of his reasonings was that USC wide receivers don't always go on to the NFL to become total studs. Mm-hmm. Okay, fair point. There's a few, Nelson Aguilar's. There's a few we as Eagles fans that I'm sorry, I might have taken a jab to the heart. But I think I might have been hearing this wrong. But I think immediately after he said that point, he said N'Keal Harry, as if that disproves everything that USC holds, in that they have this NFL stud guy that he suddenly, because of what he's doing in the NFL, all of a sudden makes Arizona State wide receiver U, when USC has had several guys that are way better than Harry. Again, I may totally be misrepresenting his point, and if so, I apologize, but I just don't know where exactly that fit in.
I mean, even when we talk about a guy, right, and I didn't get to catch the whole thing either, but when I think back, because I'm really deep into the draft, so I know the prospects that are coming out. A couple of years back, Jalen Strong, and I thought Jalen Strong was going to be damn good. Jalen Strong was not. I think he might be out of the league right now. What are we doing here? What do we do? I get it. I know you got to have some sort of thing to hang your hat on if you're ASU, because frankly, it hasn't been that good over the past couple of years. But this isn't. Don't. If you're going to swing for the king, you better not miss, because we just duck and weaved out of that. But I do want to bring up this question, because it got us thinking about wide receivers that came out of USC, and the question we're going to ask. Not who is the greatest wide receiver in USC history, because I think we both agree, Marquise Lee. It's hard to make an argument against that dude. He's most all-time in receiving yards. And again, that's a dude that didn't have the greatest NFL career. But I do want to bring this up. If we're going to talk about NFL, and that takes into account, let's not hear about Tim Tebow, right? Not top 5 college quarterback of all time, even though the dude won 2 national championships, Heisman's. We're not talking about Tim Tebow anymore because the NFL matters. Not talking about Johnny Manziel. Come on, man. We're talking about college football here. This is a college football-oriented show. We're talking about college football production, college football players, college football results. That's what we're talking about here. So when we're talking about college football wide receivers that went to USC, who to you, Nathan, is the second greatest wide receiver of all time at USC?
All right. Full disclosure. I was watching the clip from the Trojan Dash show. Mm-hmm. And I was looking in. I was like, okay, we know the big names. We know Marquise Lee. We know Juju. Who are the guys? USC is wide receiver U. Who are the guys that I'm not as familiar with that were studs back in the day? And I came across Dwayne Jarrett. This guy is a beast. 41 touchdowns, most in USC wide receiver history. 3,138 yards. And I was watching some of his tape, because I'm a big eye test guy. I love stats, but I'm a big eye test guy first. Mm-hmm. And the way I see it, there are some receivers that are elusive. There are some receivers that are fast. Some guys make catches in traffic, and some guys are just physical. Some guys are just strong. They get yards after contact. They can get blown up in midair by 3 different guys, and they can still come down with the ball. Dwayne Jarrett was all of that. This guy made every single play. You put the ball anywhere near him, doesn't matter who else is near. He's making the play. So Dwayne Jarrett, I got him number 2 all time.
And I mess with that too. But the only problem I have, I'm only 19 years old, man. He played from 05 to 06, I think. I was too young to even witness that. So I won't even try to, address that. But I do want to address the guy that I was old enough to observe, and that's Juju Smith-Schuster, bro. You brought his name up. I think he's the second greatest wide receiver of all time. We talk about a homegrown talent. The dude went to Long Beach Poly. He came to SC, and he absolutely killed the game, man. Second-round pick. Dude went, if we're going to talk about NFL production all of a sudden, I mean, we got to bring up the fact that the dude's probably one of the top 15 receivers in the game right now. And when he was here, oh, my God. Dominating force. You talk about all of the intangibles that you want to see from a wide receiver, the physicality, the speed, the elusiveness, the route running. We want to see all of that. Juju had the whole package, man. Juju Smith. And on top of all that, sick name, Juju. You just know he's a baller. The name is Juju Smith-Schuster. You know the dude had to be a baller. From my perspective, I didn't get to watch a whole lot of Dwayne Jarrett. I got to see a hell of a lot of Juju Smith-Schuster, and that dude was a stone-cold baller, man. I got to give number 2 all time to my guy Juju. And I met him one time. That no bias. I did meet him one time. I got to like talk to him a little bit. Might be a bit of a biased impression there, but I got to give it to Juju, man.
It looks like we've been shouting from the rooftops about wide receiver use so loud that Wills Rice has come to join the chat, and he's got a question. In this argument, can you define your parameters for wide receiver U? Is it all college production or what they did in the NFL? Wide receiver U. We're talking about college production here. If you have a legendary classic NFL career, that's an added bonus. But as far as I'm concerned, it's about what you do in college. If it's about what you do in the NFL, Reggie Bush is a mediocre running back. I mean, what are we doing here? This is about which colleges have the best wide receivers, not which pro wide receivers come from these colleges and which of the best NFL guys come from these certain schools. It's about what did these guys do in college? Who is the best wide receiving school in college history? That doesn't mean that the NFL doesn't matter. That's just a bonus. But if you are a stud in college and a bust in the NFL, that does not at all throw you out of the wide receiver U conversation, because when you were at university, you were a stud wide receiver. That's as far as I'm concerned.
I'm with you 100%, man. Wide receiver university. I mean, if we're talking about universities, we got to talk about the GPAs. We got to talk about what happened in college, right? That comes first and foremost when we're having this discussion. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, it's not even a contest. I know you're strong for your school. You're probably a Sun Devil through and through, man, but no. I'm just like, I guess not much more for me to say. Just no. You guys might even barely crack the top 3 in terms of wide receiver U in the Pac-12. But just no, man. I apologize, but I don't even apologize. That's just reality. We have to face the objective facts here. But Nathan, do you have anything to add?
Well, Wills is also saying in the chat, 552 yards when he doesn't have AB lining up next to him. Reagan, the floor is yours. Fire back.
Well, I will give you this, that he did not have the greatest season last year. And I hate the fact that I'm talking about NFL. Why are we still talking about NFL? But if we want to talk NFL, you just stepped into my domain, because I'm not. That's my first and foremost sport. So let me tell you this: when it comes to route runners in the NFL, you have Odell Beckham, you have Devontae Adams. We talk about that echelon of people. Juju is just on the cusp of entering that group of people. He's that good of a route runner. Juju Smith is one of the best hands in the NFL. The dude, I mean, he's such a hard worker. I mean, come on, man. Juju, I know he didn't have the greatest season last year, but let's not ignore the fact that the dude was one of the best. People were crowning him as one of the greatest wide receivers in the NFL, not to mention the fact who was throwing him the ball. Who was throwing him the ball last year? Mason Rudolph? Joshua Dobbs? Let's sprinkle a little bit of context into this before we just start throwing out empty numbers of 552 yards without AB. There's other things that go into this. Who were the wide receivers around him? James Washington? Come on, man. He was the only person that people had to guard at the wide receiver position for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You had a subpar quarterback throwing him the ball. At least give the dude a chance to play with a starting quarterback before we start passing judgment about he's not good without AB. Not to mention the injuries concerns that he had, man. Come on, man. Like if you're gonna mess with the bull, you're gonna get the horns here, bro. I got to do it to you.
Look, we got to wrap this up real soon, but I want to get back to wide receiver U. We didn't talk about Robert Woods. We didn't talk about Keyshawn Johnson. We didn't talk about Mike Williams. We didn't talk about Michael Pittman Jr. Although I guess for him, the jury's still out because he hasn't played any NFL games.
Oh yeah, Michael Pittman can't even enter the conversation because we haven't seen him play yet. Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many names that you could bring up and discuss. Deontay Burnett, you mentioned Nelson Aguilar, and not the best NFL career. He did win a Super Bowl, had some big plays that year. But even in recent years, just so many talented wide receivers that came to this school. But you know what? You might have to come up here and see it for yourself. Maybe the next time we play ASU, you'll get the opportunity to observe up close and personal how good a guys like Amon-Ra, like Brew McCoy, like Drake London, like Tyler Bonds. You'll get to see all that. You know, when they're burning your corners, you get to see how good these wide receivers over here really are. But I think that'll do it for this episode of Dash Sports TV. Nathan, thank you as always for coming on, man. Hell of a conversation. I love having it with you. Make sure you go check out the Instagram. That's at Dash Sports TV. The Twitter at Dash Sports TV. We like to obviously get a lot of trash talk going there. Go check out the website at dashsports.tv. all that good stuff. Stay tuned with what we're doing because we're going to be coming with the heat each and every single week. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.